Welcome to the Sobriety Diaries, friend. My name is Nate. I am a grateful recovering alcoholic and sober coach. My addiction has shaped the person I am today and given me the ability and voice to help others, and I simply wouldn't be here without it. Recovery is possible. The Sobriety Diaries is a video podcast where we share powerful stories of recovery told by those who live them. Head on over to thesobrietydiaries.com where you can apply to be a guest on the show and join our insiders list for exclusive content, early release episodes, and much more. Also, please share this podcast with just one person in your life who may still be struggling. You just never know what they may need to hear today. Before we jump into things today, I wanted to take a moment to thank Exact Nature for partnering with me on today's episode. Founded by a father and son in addiction recovery, Exact Nature's all-natural CBD products are specifically formulated to help you face the exceptional challenges of recovery, be it addictive cravings, depression, anxiety, or improving sleep. Learn more at exactnature.com. I absolutely love the Serenity oil. I use it every day. It is so helpful with just my focus and calm nature. As a listener of the Sobriety Diaries, use the code TSD20 to receive 20% off of your order. exactnature.com. Happy Sober Day, friends. Thank you so much for downloading today's episode and spending time with me here on the Sobriety Diaries. Today, we are talking to Jason Wood. Jason was an overweight child who got bullied because of it. And when he did, however, lose weight in high school, he was praised for it. So he began to associate this positivity with his weight being at a certain spot, and really thus began a decades-long struggle with an eating disorder. Jason's sobriety from alcohol actually came through treatment for his eating disorder, and that involved open and honest communication with his therapist to really help him heal from the inside out and those past wounds that he still had. He practices mindfulness and journaling, meditation, and a lot of outdoor activity to maintain both his eating disorder recovery and his sobriety. So let's open the diary on Jason Wood. Jason Wood, thank you so much for joining us on the Sobriety Diaries. How's your day going?
Yeah, it's going great. Just getting started here, but already it's looking like it's going to be a great day. So I'm feeling good, and thank you so much for having me here today.
Absolutely. Happy that we connected, and I am excited to hear your story. I think that we relate on a few different levels, so I'm excited to kind of open that dialogue. What inspired you to come share your story today?
You know, it's been incredible because social media in a lot of ways fueled a lot of my addiction or my unhealthy relationship with food, but it's also been so beneficial for me in my recovery. And it's making these connections with other individuals who are just embracing vulnerability and opening up and sharing their stories. And that's what really resonated between us, because I just really appreciate you getting out there and sharing your story and helping other people share their stories, because I think there's so much power and so much benefit when we talk and when we listen. And I was just so excited for the opportunity to come on today to be able to share my story.
So well said. Thank you, my friend. And you said something that I think a lot of people don't realize a lot of the time, and that's the listening. Sometimes people just need an ear. And if you are there to listen, I think that can be huge for somebody. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things where I used to be a problem solver, and I used to, as soon as somebody would share their story with me, I'd try to fix it. And now I'm realizing that sometimes all you got to do is listen, because that's all I need sometimes, is to just be able to share, and I don't even need a response back. I just need an ear. So yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up.
Well, I'm ready to listen.
Yeah.
So let's walk through your journey together and your addiction
hmm
and path to recovery.
Yeah, okay, absolutely. So for me, it started out as a kid. You know, I was picked on for my weight. It made me feel very insecure about who I was. I lost my dad at a young age, so I lost that kind of male influence in my life, and I just didn't feel like I was enough. I didn't feel like I was enough just as a person. I didn't feel like I was enough as a man. And I very often turned to alcohol once I got to high school and college because it made me feel like I could go out and be cool, be enough, be somebody who other people would be interested in. And I had such anxiety and such fear inside of me going out in public and interacting with people that I would often use alcohol kind of as a security blanket to mask those insecurities, those anxieties, those worries. And as time went along, that relationship with alcohol just continued to evolve to the point where I lost the line between fun and alcohol. It was just I couldn't have fun without drinking, and I couldn't drink without having fun.
Mm.
But then I started getting angry. Probably about 5 years ago, I started getting more aggressive as I was drinking. I used to kind of just be that fun, laid back guy who was obnoxious in the life of the
Yeah,
party.
right.
And suddenly I became the guy who was always ready to like knock somebody in the face. And it caused a lot of tension between me and my husband. There was a lot of just, I guess, pain and hurt that was inside of me that I was expressing as anger. And oftentimes, since he was the closest person to me, he was taking the brunt of it. And prior to the pandemic, we really had some rocky times, and it got difficult because I was drinking most of the time. I would come up with excuses to drink. At the beginning, it was I would just drink heavy kind of on the weekends. But then I'd suddenly be like, oh, well, there's this baseball game going on tonight, so I'm going to drink tonight. Or, ooh, I've got a busy day at work tomorrow, so I'll just treat myself and have a couple drinks tonight. And it really it kind of escalated there right before the pandemic. And I just remember waking up some mornings just shaking because I was going through withdrawals, and I just needed to get that next drink because anxiety and the insecurities were just consuming me. And then my husband would come out of the bedroom and he would have tears because I had said mean, hurtful things to him the night before that I had no recollection of. And that's when I started to realize this is a lot more than just drinking to be the cool guy. This is drinking to, hide something, to try to fix something, and it's not fixing anything. It's actually making things worse. And for me, it was actually the start of the pandemic that allowed me the opportunity to begin to embrace sobriety, because along those same lines, I was battling an eating disorder at the time, which I know we'll get into too. But it was at the start of the pandemic when I didn't have those social interactions, those social requirements anymore, that I was kind of able to finally turn inward and focus on myself. And I realized this is my opportunity. This is a really bad time that's happening in the world, but this is an opportunity for me to make some good of that on a personal level. And, that's when I committed to sobriety and then my recovery from my eating disorder. And now the last year or so has just been about experiencing life sober. And it's pretty beautiful. It's pretty awesome. And it's something that I think is taking me back to those childhood days again, where I was before the pain and the hurt and the insecurities kind of took full hold of me.
Yeah. I think that is profound for someone to use the last year of sort of chaos and isolation and what we've all been experiencing and use it to turn inward and focus on evolution and bettering
hmm
ourselves. We see so much of the negativity and people that went in the opposite direction with the
hmm
addiction rates and the sale of alcohol and the overdoses and the suicide rates just skyrocketing during the pandemic. I think these stories are ones that I love to share where people took the time to better themselves and made a decision to live a better life and evolve as a person. So I love that.
Right.
I want to maybe if we can go back a little bit, did you find as a child, food was your first addiction? And did that provide a sense of comfort to you that sort of started the numbing or the addiction?
Yeah, absolutely. It was because I had mentioned that I was overweight as a kid, and then in high school is when I joined a weight loss program and I lost the weight. And at that point, the same people who were picking on me were now praising me, and they were saying, "Wow, you've got amazing willpower. I can't believe you did this. I'm so proud of you." And that kind of planted the seed right there, that unhealthy relationship with food, because I it gave me the false sense that I could have control over things. So
Right.
as my life started spiraling out of control, and as the pain and the insecurities began to mount following the passing of my parents in my teenage years, and then falling out with my family and financial hardship, I always turned back to food because that seemed to be the one thing that I was good at, that people were praising me for. And it seemed like the one thing that I could control. While everything else in my life might have been spinning out of control, at least I had food that I could restrict when I needed, or label it good or bad and decide what I was going to eat. And I can definitely see where that relationship with food was that kind of first addiction, that first need for control.
So after you lost the weight, did it continue to be unhealthy? Did it progress to, anorexia or bulimia? How do you classify
Mhm.
where you stand with your eating disorder now?
Yeah, so after I lost the weight, it kind of made me very fearful of gaining the weight back. And I
Sure.
would often joke with people that it was easier to lose the weight than it was to keep it off, because I worried that just one bad meal, one bad day would ruin all the progress I've made, and then everybody would see me as a disappointment. And it would just invalidate everything I had already accomplished. So it actually became more stressful for me around food after that initial weight loss in high school. And over years, I would say at first it was just a disordered relationship with food. I was very restricted on the weekdays, but then on the weekends, I would basically just eat whatever I wanted to. And then as soon as Monday rolled back around, it became very strict again. I would adhere to just a very what I thought was a safe, a clean diet. I ended up getting diagnosed with an unspecified eating disorder last year, which I would later learn is called orthorexia, what I've been battling. And that's basically an addiction to healthy, clean eating. So while individuals with anorexia are just restricting on a calorie basis, or individuals with bulimia are binging and then purging, for me, I was still eating, but I was only eating the foods that I deemed healthy and clean. So for me, the fad diets played a big role in it, keto and Whole30 and all of those. I kind of morphed them all into one
Yeah.
very restricted diet where I was labeling foods good or bad and cutting out entire food groups. I have a little joke that I used to tell people at the start of my recovery, but it's like, how do you explain to someone that that loaf of bread gives you anxiety? Because that's how it would be for me. I would see a loaf of bread and, my heart would start racing, or
Yeah.
I'd get all sweaty. And that's just kind of that's where that relationship with food went, as it progressed for about 15 years from high school to the point where I would actually receive a diagnosis.
Hmm. I'm curious about because the timeline seems just to line up as far as the weight loss and sort of the start of your drinking. Did you have a specific first experience with alcohol or something that sort of opened the door, or was it a slow progression?
Yeah, I would say it was pretty much a slow progression. It kind of started out, hanging out with high school friends, and we'd have a beer. One of those cool 21-year-olds would get us a beer, and
Yeah.
we would have that. And at first, it was kind of like I could have a beer and kind of escape what was going on in my life. At that point, my mom was very sick, and I had just lost my dad, and I was just very insecure about who I was. And it was like, okay, well, I can have a drink with these friends and those worries kind of disappear for the evening. And then as time went along, it was like I wanted to escape them every evening. And then suddenly it was every afternoon and evening. And then it would just kind of become an all day event where I would drink from the time I woke up to the time I'd go to bed. And it was because I thought it was the only escape from everything else in my life that seemed to be falling apart. I could at least have that drink and have a little bit of fun.
So relatable to my story. It was like the magic elixir, right? That like
Hmm.
opened up relationships and opened up, getting invitations to like the cool kid parties. And I associated all of these, what I thought were positive attributes to alcohol or positive reactions to drinking alcohol, that it went on like that for years. It was fun until it wasn't fun anymore, and it was social until I was doing it behind closed doors. But I think in the
Exactly.
beginning, like alcohol worked for me. I
Hmm.
wouldn't have ever come out of my shell or experienced half the things that I did had it not been for alcohol. And this is not a plug for alcohol by any means, because it turned negative and it turned miserable and depressive
Right.
very quickly. But there was that short period of time where it opened the door to some things for me at least.
Oh yeah, yeah, for me too. It gave me that courage, I guess. But you know how they always refer to the liquid courage.
Yeah,
It gave me
absolutely.
that opportunity to interact with people who I didn't think I was worthy of. I didn't think I was good enough to actually talk to them. But when I was under the influence, I would actually have the courage and the bravery to go and talk to them. And actually, from those early days of drinking, that's how I've met some of my best friends today. And now we're able
Same.
to all get together and drink iced teas and be
Yeah.
sober. But it was actually through those drinks and those nights out at the bars that I've met some of the people who are the closest to me now.
Same. Yeah. I think I probably wouldn't have gone to college. Like I probably wouldn't have moved out of the small town that I grew up in. So when was your last drink?
So it would have been, let's see, in March of 2020. So I don't have the actual date. I feel like I'm kind of behind, especially with a lot of sobriety where we celebrate it. But for me, it was actually through my eating disorder recovery that I became sober. At the time that I put down my last drink, I didn't think I had anything wrong with me. I didn't think there was anything wrong as far as the relationship with alcohol. It's only been as I progressed through my eating disorder recovery that I realized how toxic my relationship was with alcohol. And that's actually kind of how I began to embrace sobriety. It was almost an unintended consequence. It was an added benefit of the eating disorder recovery that I was able to recover from my addiction with alcohol as well.
And that took the form of what, therapy sessions?
Yeah, so I started working with a therapist, and it was having those just open and honest conversations. I tell everybody that if you're gonna have a therapist, which I think everybody should, because he opened my eyes to things I didn't even realize were going on.
Amen. If the world was in therapy, Jason, we would live in a much happier place.
Oh yeah. Because like I said, there were things going on in my life that I didn't even realize were going on. There was pain inside I didn't even realize until I had a therapist. And then the most important thing is to have the open and honest conversations with him. I never left anything inside. So every hour when I sit down and I talk with him, I just let it all flow. And I don't worry about judgment. I don't worry about reactions. I just let it all flow. And that's how I've been able to heal. So yes, the therapy has been a huge part of it. I've also kind of had a lot of supplemental activities too that I engage in a lot of mindfulness activities. I'll go hiking or I do a lot of reading and journaling. And those are just all things that kind of help take the therapy sessions that I have once a week and expand them throughout my entire week. And it's been through those conversations and those experiences that I've realized that yes, I had an abusive relationship with alcohol. Yes, I was battling an eating disorder. Yes, there was all this unresolved pain and insecurities that were bubbling up inside. But I probably would have continued to be blind to them unless I would have met with my therapist.
I'm curious about your husband. Now, did it ever get to the point where he was sort of fed up, or was he kind of your rock and supportive through everything, even, in the lowest of times.
Yeah, he's always been my rock, and I have always been so grateful to him for kind of helping me find that solid footing in life, because I had so much happen to me in my late teens and early 20s that it was a very rocky beginning to my adulthood. But it was thanks to him that I found stability, and it's I guess it's the perfect, not ending, but the perfect next chapter, that he
Yeah.
would be such a rock for me in my recovery too. The last time that I drank was one of our biggest fights, and it just left him hurt. It just left him broken, and it was seeing him respond that way, seeing that I could hurt somebody that bad that I loved this much, that I realized I needed to make the change. So it was thanks to him that I realized I needed to embrace sobriety. And then it was thanks to him that I realized I had an unhealthy relationship with food. He raised concerns one night while we were out to dinner about my eating habits. I had had just a complete breakdown at the restaurant over being unable to substitute the pita on the hummus platter for fresh vegetables. And it might sound so trivial or so silly, but that was enough to send me over the edge. And I just started crying. I got very aggressive, very emotional. And it was in that moment that he said, "I'm worried about you. And I've seen this pain that's going on inside, and I see how you're restricting your diet, and I'm just very concerned." And those words, just those changed my life, because it was the next week that I met with my doctor and then met with a therapist and started this path to recovery. And he's been there every step along the way. And there are tough times, there are tough days for sure. But he's always just been there to remind me that I'm enough. Because I think sometimes that's the hardest thing in recovery when it gets tough, is to remind yourself that you're worth it and that you're enough. And that's what he's done every day.
Amazing. So happy to hear that. So you mentioned revisiting some things, hiking and reading, and I know you're blogging. Why don't you tell us about the
Mhm.
blog you started?
Yeah, so I started a blog, Orthorexia Bites, in February of 2021. And it was actually thanks to an assignment from my therapist that this all kind of began. I was worried about sharing my story with my friends. I was worried that they might see me as a fraud, as somebody who had worn masks for so long. And I'm not talking COVID masks,
Right.
I'm talking those masks over my heart. And I was worried that people, they'd think I was lying to him for all those years. So he told me, go ahead and write your story out. Writing's always been something I'm passionate about, been a great outlet for me. So I wrote my story down. And as I was reading it back to myself, I felt sorry for the main character. I felt his pain and the hurt that was going on inside. And I realized he was just doing the best he could. Then I realized that person was me. And it was through that that I gained self compassion and self love, and actually, began to forgive myself for all those things I held against me for so long. And I realized the power of being able to share my story. And I knew that as a man battling an eating disorder and mental illness, that I needed to get my voice out there, because there were a lot of other guys who are going through some of the same things I went through. But because of the stigmas and the stereotypes that exist in society, we don't talk about it. We don't even think that it can happen to us. So I knew if I could use this same story that opened my eyes, that perhaps it could help open other people's eyes too. And that's why I launched my blog earlier this year, to just get out there and to raise awareness and to confront those stigmas and stereotypes that exist.
So true. And I think to your point, a man recovering from eating disorders is such a powerful expression, and maybe not the common portrait for an eating disorder. And I think that makes it so much more powerful.
Hmm.
So I'm super happy to see that. I will link all of Jason's online contact and where to find the blog and all of that good stuff in today's show notes. So make sure you check that out. I asked you for a few action items for our listeners today. So, what are a few things that you would like our listeners to take away from hearing you today, or some action items we can provide them today?
Yeah, so for me, the biggest action item of all is to talk, to embrace vulnerability and to speak up, that is just so important, because for so long I stayed quiet. And I told you right before we started recording, but I was a closed book for so long. And now I'm open and I'm sharing my story, because there is so much power in storytelling. And even though you might not think that your story has that much power, it really does. You never know who needs to hear it, who can relate to it, who can connect to it. And it's been through reading other people's stories and listening to other people that I've been able to do a lot of my healing too. And I urge everybody out there to wear their heart on their sleeve and to speak up, because I think the world could be a much better place. We'd all be probably a lot healthier mentally and emotionally if we just spoke up rather than stay quiet or listen to those stigmas and stereotypes.
Wow, couldn't agree more. So well spoken, so well said. Jason Wood, thank you for your time today, my friend. You're now part of the Sobriety Diaries family. The family reunion's coming up soon, so we'll see you there.
Awesome. It's a great family to be a part of.
Thanks for your time. Let's be in touch, okay?
All right, sounds good.
Wow, such a powerful story. Thank you for listening today. Hopefully you heard something that resonates with you. And if we help just one person, our job is done. You can find all things podcast related and subscribe to our show at thesobrietydiaries.com, youtube.com/Nate Kelly, where we upload today's video podcast, and on Instagram at the Sobriety Diaries Pod. Check back every Wednesday and Sunday for new episodes, but until then, try your best not to drink and be good to yourself. Bye, friends.